When the sun dipped behind the dry ridges of the valley, the cowboy named Daniel Hart knew trouble was coming again. He had seen the signs since morning: broken branches, footprints too light for a man but too careful for an animal, and a strange, uneasy silence in the air. He had spent years on this land, and he understood danger the same way he understood the patterns of horses or the smell of rain. Something was watching him. Something was waiting. Daniel tightened his grip on the rope he had been using to check the fence line. He tried to stay calm, yet he could not shake the memory of the last time he had found someone wandering close to his property. It had been the wife of a man who hated him deeply, a rival rancher named Cole Maddox. The Maddox family had blamed Daniel for every little fight that happened between their lands. They claimed he had taken their water rights, their grazing space, even their luck. It was not true. But hatred did not need truth. It only needed someone to point at. The wife, Elena, had stumbled onto Daniel's ranch weeks ago, hungry, cold, and trembling. She had been too proud to ask for help, but too weak to walk away. Daniel had fed her, given her water, and let her rest before sending her back home with supplies. But Cole had not thanked anyone for saving her. Instead, he had accused Daniel of trying to steal her, of trying to shame the Maddox name. Daniel never defended himself. He simply stepped back and kept his distance, hoping the trouble would fade. But today, the same uneasy feeling returned, and the air smelled like fear again. Daniel walked back toward the barn, his boots crunching softly on the dirt. He tried to distract himself by checking the horses, but his thoughts kept drifting. He remembered Elena's face, the last time: sunken cheeks, shaking hands, eyes full of worry. She had whispered something when she left, something that had stayed in his mind ever since. "Please don't tell him I was here." Daniel had nodded. He kept his promise, but he also hoped she would never be desperate enough to come again, because he knew Cole would blame him, hurt her, or both. As he reached the barn door, his horse Duke snorted and stomped nervously. Daniel paused. Duke never behaved like that unless someone unfamiliar was nearby. Daniel's heartbeat quickened. He stepped inside the barn slowly, letting his eyes adjust to the dim light. That was when he heard it. A soft, broken sigh. It came from the far corner, behind the stacks of hay. Daniel moved toward the sound, each step slow and cautious. He reached the last stack, and his breath caught in his throat. Elena was there. She was sitting on the cold ground, arms wrapped around herself, her long dark hair tangled, her clothes dusty and torn at the sleeve. She looked thinner than before, like she had been starving for days. When she lifted her head, her eyes were wet and filled with exhaustion. "Daniel," she whispered, and her voice cracked. He dropped to one knee in front of her, shocked, worried, and confused all at once. "Elena, what happened? Why are you here again?" His voice was gentle, but anxiety rushed through him. She tried to answer but only managed a faint shake of her head. Daniel looked at the way she pressed her arms against her stomach. She looked pale, weak, almost ready to collapse. He reached out and helped her sit upright before she could fall. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know where else to go." The words hit him like a stone. Elena Maddox had enemies she never chose. Her own world, her own hunger, and the harsh life her husband had dragged her into. She was not his enemy, even if she came from a family that called him one. She was simply someone fighting to survive. "You shouldn't be here," Daniel said softly. "If he finds out." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Her eyes lowered. "He won't care where I am today," she murmured. "He's gone for a week. He left me nothing. No food. No money. And I couldn't stand the hunger anymore." Her voice trembled. "I walked for hours. I thought maybe I could make it to town, but I fainted once already. I just needed a place out of the sun." I. Daniel felt a sharp twist in his chest. How long had she been suffering? How long had she kept quiet out of fear? He helped her lean against the hay and rushed to bring water. When he returned, she drank slowly, her hands trembling so badly that Daniel had to steady the cup for her. "You're shaking," he said gently. "I haven't eaten in 2 days." He stood quickly, grabbed a small basket of preserved biscuits and dried fruit from the barn shelf, and brought it to her. Elena hesitated, embarrassed, but hunger won. She ate slowly, tears slipping down her cheeks. Daniel pretended not to notice, but he felt every drop like a wound. When she finished eating, she wiped her face with her sleeve and whispered, "Thank you. I didn't want to bother you again. I know what it caused last time." Daniel sighed deeply and sat beside her, leaving a respectful space. "You didn't cause trouble. I only want you safe. We..." Her voice softened. "Cole thinks everyone is an enemy. He even said you're trying to ruin him. But you're the only person who helped me, without asking anything." Daniel felt warmth rise in his chest but pushed it aside. He didn't want to make things hard for her. He didn't want her to feel guilty for surviving, but he also knew she couldn't stay long. "Elena," he said quietly, "please don't do this again. If anyone sees you here, if he finds out, he'll twist the story. He always does." Her eyes filled with a sadness he couldn't understand at first. Then she looked away and whispered, "I know. But today, when I fell down on the trail, I thought I wouldn't wake up." Daniel's heart tightened. He could almost see the long road she had walked, dust rising around her, sun beating down, hope slipping away step by step. He knew she wasn't lying. Hunger had pushed her past fear. "Elena, listen," he said firmly. "You're not alone. I'll help you get to town. I'll buy you food, get you a safe place to rest. You don't have to stay here. You don't have to stay with him either." Her breath caught. "Leave him? I can't. He'll come after me. He always comes after me." Daniel stared into her tired eyes, and for the first time, he saw not only hunger, but something deeper. Years of fear, silence, and being trapped in a life she had no way to escape. He was about to speak when she swayed suddenly, her body leaning toward him. Without thinking, Daniel reached out to steady her. But instead of pulling back, she collapsed against his chest, her weight soft but desperate. Her forehead rested near his shoulder. Her hands clutched the fabric of his shirt as if she was afraid to fall again. "I'm sorry," she breathed. I can't stand anymore." Daniel froze, the warmth of her fragile body pressing into him. He lifted his arms carefully, not wanting her to think he misunderstood anything. He was only trying to keep her from falling. But Elena's voice came again, soft and broken. "I didn't mean to fall into your arms. I'm so tired." He swallowed hard. "I know," he whispered. "I've got you. You're safe, Elena." Outside, the land grew darker, and the wind carried a distant howl. Trouble was coming, and Daniel knew the night would not pass quietly. But in that moment, all he cared about was the woman trembling in his arms, an enemy's wife, a starving soul, and someone who had finally stopped hiding her fear. Deep down, he knew this moment would change everything. Night settled slowly across the valley, but Daniel Hart barely noticed the darkness. His focus stayed on the trembling woman leaning against his chest. Elena's breathing was uneven, each breath showing how weak she truly was. He helped her sit more comfortably, keeping one arm behind her back so she wouldn't fall again. Every few minutes, she tried to apologize, but Daniel gently stopped her. "You don't have to say sorry," he whispered. "Just breathe. You're safe." For a long while, she didn't move. The warmth of the hay around them, the soft sounds of the horses nearby. and the calm rhythm of Daniel's voice seemed to ease her shaking. When she finally lifted her head, her eyes were glassy, but she managed a small, grateful smile. "I didn't mean to trouble you," she said softly. "You didn't," Daniel replied. "Anyone would help you. I'm just glad you made it here before you fainted again." She lowered her gaze. "I didn't think I would. Half the time I couldn't feel my legs." Daniel felt anger rise inside him, not at her, but at the situation she had been forced to live in. No person deserved to be left hungry for days. No one deserved to feel like they were begging for survival. "You need rest," he said firmly. "You can stay here for a bit, until you get some strength back. I'll take you to town when morning comes." Elena hesitated. "What if someone sees me leaving your ranch?" "They won't," Daniel assured her. "We'll leave before sunrise. No one watches my road that early." She nodded slowly, but Daniel could still see the worry in her eyes. Her life had taught her to fear every shadow, every footstep, every whisper that could be twisted into something harmful. He hated that. He wished he could erase it all. He helped her stand, supporting her as they moved toward a small storage room in the barn. It wasn't fancy, but it was clean, warm, and quiet. There was a spare blanket folded on a shelf, and Daniel quickly shook off the dust before handing it to her. "You can rest here," he said. "I'll stay nearby to make sure you don't fall again." Elena looked up at him, and for a moment, her tired eyes softened with something like trust. "You've already done more for me than anyone has in years." Daniel stepped back, unsure how to respond. He didn't help her for praise. He helped her because something about her struggle felt wrong to ignore. Maybe it was her quiet bravery, or the way she kept trying to stand even when she was ready to collapse. Or maybe he simply couldn't stand to see anyone suffer in silence. Elena settled onto the blanket, pulling it around her shoulders. She looked small and fragile against the wooden wall, like a bird trying to hide its broken wings. Daniel pulled up a crate and sat a short distance away. He didn't want her to feel watched, but he also didn't want her to feel alone. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a while. "Of course," he replied. Elena looked down at her hands, her voice barely above a whisper. "Why do you help me? You owe me nothing, and you know my family considers you an enemy." Daniel exhaled, rubbing a hand across his jaw. "Because you're not my enemy. You never were. Your family chose anger, but you didn't. And even if you had, hunger isn't something I can ignore." She stared at him with surprise, as if kindness was something rare and difficult to trust. "Most people wouldn't take that risk." "I'm not most people," he said gently. For the first time since she arrived, she allowed herself a small laugh. It was faint, but it carried warmth. Then, her expression shifted, becoming thoughtful and heavy. "Daniel," she said softly, "if Cole finds out I came here again, he'll think the worst." "My." Daniel nodded. "I know. That's why you can't stay long. Tomorrow, we'll get you supplies and a safe place to rest. After that..." He paused. "After that, it's up to you what you want. 7, 4, 1 time Zide, 1 time Zide, 7, and we have a wage, end, 1 time Zide, end 1 time Zide." Her breath trembled. "I don't know what I want anymore. I don't know where I belong." Daniel wanted to tell her she deserved better. He wanted to say she didn't have to go back to a life full of fear. But he couldn't push her. She had to make her own choices. "You belong somewhere you can breathe," he said quietly. "Somewhere you don't have to be afraid." Elena closed her eyes, and 2 tears slipped down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. She was too tired to hide them. "You talk about peace as if it's something real," she whispered. "It is," Daniel replied. "You just haven't seen it yet." Hours passed in silence. Elena drifted to sleep, her breathing finally calming. Daniel stayed awake, listening to every sound outside, the wind moving through the grass, an owl calling in the distance, the faint creak of the barn's wood. He remained alert, but his mind kept returning to Elena's words, her fear, her hunger, and the trust she had shown him in her weakest moment. When dawn finally arrived, a pale blue light crept into the barn. Daniel stood, stretched, and checked the road through a narrow crack in the wall. No one was around. It was the perfect time to leave. He gently tapped Elena's shoulder. "It's time." She blinked sleepily, then sat up with effort. She looked stronger than last night, but still tired. Daniel helped her stand and guided her outside. The early morning air was cold, but fresh, and the sky shimmered with soft colors. Daniel saddled Duke quickly. "You ride. I'll lead the horse." Elena shook her head. "I can walk." "You shouldn't," Daniel said firmly. "You barely made it here yesterday. Let me help." This time she didn't argue. He lifted her carefully onto the horse, making sure she was balanced and steady. Then he took the rope and began walking alongside Duke, heading toward the road that led to town. For a few minutes, the journey was peaceful. The land stretched wide and empty, the sun slowly rising behind them. Elena held onto the saddle, her eyes drifting over the quiet scenery. But she seemed thoughtful, almost restless. Finally, she whispered, "Daniel, please don't do this again." He looked up at her in confusion. "What do you mean?" She hesitated before answering. "Don't risk yourself for me. Don't let me come to you anymore. You tried to warn me before, and I didn't listen. But this time, I understand." Daniel stopped walking. "Elena, helping someone isn't a risk. It's the right thing." "But you don't understand," she said, her voice shaking. "Cole will think I came here because I wanted to, because I chose you over him, and that will only make him angrier. I don't want you dragged into that." Daniel stepped closer, looking up at her with soft eyes. "Elena, you were starving. Anyone with a heart would have helped you." She stared into his eyes, and for a moment, the world seemed to pause around them. Then she leaned down, her voice almost a whisper. "That's what scares me. You have a heart, and when he sees that, he'll use it against us." Daniel took a long breath, steadying himself. He could feel the weight of the truth in her words. But he also knew walking away from her wasn't something he could do. "I don't regret helping you," he said quietly, "and I won't stop being someone you can trust, even if you tell me not to." Kramer. A tear rolled down her cheek. "Why do you care so much?" Daniel looked away, searching for the right words. "Because you deserve kindness. Because no one should face hunger alone. Because when you fell into my arms last night, I saw a person fighting for her life, not an enemy." Silence fell between them, deep and emotional. Elena finally wiped her tear and whispered, "If only things were different." Daniel nodded. "Maybe someday they will be." They reached the town's edge as the sun rose fully, casting warm light across the wooden buildings. Daniel helped her down from the horse and guided her toward the small general store, where he knew she could find food and rest. Before entering, Elena turned to him, her face soft and full of gratitude. "I won't forget what you did," she said. "But please, don't let me be the reason trouble comes to your door." Daniel looked at her one last time, knowing this moment would stay with him forever. "You're not trouble, Elena," he said. "You're someone who needed help. And my door will never be closed to someone like that." She held his gaze for a moment that felt longer than time itself. Then she stepped inside the store. Daniel stood outside, watching her, knowing the road ahead would not be easy for her, but hoping, quietly and deeply, that this was the beginning of a new strength for her, and perhaps a new meaning for him as well. Their story did not end here. It simply began with a plea, a fall, and an unexpected embrace that changed both of them forever.